This segment of Naperville Sports Weekly is brought to you by the Daily Herald.
I'm here with John Corrigan, assistant coach for Benet Academy girls basketball. Thanks for joining me today, John.
Thanks for having me.
Now, being a member of the coaching staff for both of the back-to-back state title teams, what's that experience been like for you? Just, I guess, kind of the differences of each year, now knowing what it takes to do it twice.
Sure. I think last year going into it, it really, not that it caught us by surprise, but it was definitely a new experience for the program. It hadn't been downstate since 1998, back when they had the Elite Eight down there, and a lot of the girls on the team now weren't even born in 1998. So this was, and it being Joe Kilbride's first year as the head coach, in my first year coaching girls, it was a new experience for really everyone involved. So I remember after we won the super sectional on the bus ride home, it was almost like, all right, what now? And there's a lot of work that goes into getting prepared for going downstate. So one of my roles that week last year and kind of replicated this year was itinerary director or cruise director or whatever, just trying to get everything organized so that we had enough time to watch film and enough time to walk through and get practices situated and everything like that. So I took on a little bit of that role for Joe so that he could focus more on game prep and watching film and breaking down the opponents.
And what are some things that you've learned under Coach Kilbride, having him come in his 2 years as a head coach? I mean, the two best seasons you can possibly ask for. What are some things that you've learned from him, his demeanor and kind of just that mindset that he's been able to kind of instill in this team?
For sure. One thing that he preaches is the system, that he puts in a certain system, and he doesn't ever get too emotional one way or the other, right? Even when we're doing really, really well, he gets excited, but not overly so. When we're doing poorly, he tries to calm the girls down and say, look, stay the course, and the system will work out in the end if we play the way we're capable of playing. And I think that really rubs off on the girls is they take on that kind of demeanor, is that he's always calm, cool, and collected, and even when you get down big or when you give up a lead, and that's what tends to happen with the way we play fast is there's going to be a lot more possessions, so there's more chances for other teams to come back. If we miss a few shots, they make a few shots, but we never get too high or too low, and you see that with especially our seniors and our captains, is even when they face some adversity, is they never get out of whack, they never got out of sorts. It's always, all right, well, just give me the ball and let's go back and keep playing. So that's one thing that I've learned, and Joe and I coached under John Heitkamp as well on the boys' side for 6 years with the freshmen. They both put so much work into preparing their teams for each and every game, never taking any opponent lightly, respecting all of our opponents, but fearing none of them. And that's kind of the mantra that both sides of Benet basketball have taken on. Is we've had a lot of success in the last 5, 6, 7 years, and I think a lot of that starts with the coaching.
And you mentioned that system, and I think that really kind of showed off how effective it is this year. Looking back at last year's team, just such a talented group of starters. You look at Emily Ashu and Emily Schrammick having, finishing out their phenomenal career, and then Kathleen really starting to emerge. But coming into this year, it was kind of like, okay, top 2 scorers are going to be heading out. Where do we go from here? And it ended up being such a different kind of style, but having it be the same though with that system that you mentioned, and just seeing its effectiveness. What were some things that you noticed, compared to, I guess, more of the offensive threat last year compared to kind of the shutdown defensive mentality from this year?
Sure. We had flashes of last year. At times we weren't scoring 80, but we were getting into the 60s and 70s against some opponents. Obviously, second year in any system, people are going to start figuring things out, sending fewer people to the glass, getting more people back on defense, and trying to stop our runouts. We didn't have as prolific an offensive team this year, but it just, I think it speaks to Joe and how he's able to plug different pieces in and really get 5 or 6 or 7 or however many girls are playing that particular day to really buy in and adjust on the fly. Is like, what's hurting us today? All right, well, we need to adjust and make sure that we're stopping their inside game or doubling the post, and or getting out to shooters, whatever that may be. And there were times last year where I think teams were unprepared for the press that we were putting on them, and so we were getting steal layup. Mm-hmm. You saw that again in flashes this year, but a lot more often teams were ready for it, and so then it was a mid-game adjustment as to, okay, we want to keep the pressure on, we want to keep them running, but how do we get stops and rebound and get more possessions than them without getting steal bucket.
And just looking at this group of seniors, to start out, we've got to talk about Kathleen a little bit. And just looking at the run that she was able to make throughout the playoffs, kind of struggled a little bit against Nequa in the sectional semis, then comes out in the sectional final with a career-high 31 points. And looking at the super sectional, another game, not the best shooting percentage, but game comes down to the line, final seconds, she comes through. And then that state game, such a big part of that fourth quarter, 11 fourth quarter points in that come from behind win late. Just what are some things you've seen from her? And you mentioned, Kilbride kind of mentioning, never getting rattled and that kind of coming over to the team. And that just seems like something that Kathleen has really kind of adapted to herself as well. And, she never seems flustered, always seems to be that same calm, cool, collected player, and just really came through in some huge moments for you guys this season.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's been really fun to watch is her understanding her role as she's gotten older. As a junior, she relies on Emily Ashew and Emily Schrammick. One thing that she's always been able to do is break down an opponent and get a shot for somebody. And she could, for all intents and purposes, get a shot for herself anytime she wanted. But I think she's learned over the last 2 years when to get an open shot for a teammate, when to take it all the way in herself, and I think that's been a huge part of her maturation and what's going to serve her well really on any team that she plays on. Obviously heading to the next level at Nebraska, they're getting a great player, someone who's unselfish when she needs to be and selfish when she needs to be. When she, like at the Edwardsville game in the super sectional, we needed her to take the last shot. That was the matchup, that was what we wanted, and she came through for us. In the fourth quarter of the state championship game, she was the one that we needed to take big shots because they weren't helping off of Elise, they weren't helping off of Kendall Schrammick, They were, bottling up Katie Jasickas inside. Well, if you take away all those other avenues, there's still shots open. There's still shots available, and Kathleen did a really nice job of figuring out, okay, when do I shoot, and when do I play the facilitator.
And you mentioned a few other players kind of during that last answer as well, and just looking at the impact from kind of game to game that really kind of showed off the depth. You look at Kendall Schrammick's 27 points in the sectional semis, Elise Stout with the game winner against Homestead in that huge come from behind win, and Katie Jasickas with some big doubles down the stretch. The depth of this team seemed a little more important than last year. It seemed to be like the starters really kind of were able to kind of lock down games, but this year the depth, I think, really kind of came through a little bit more. What went into kind of, was that kind of the plan, wanting to kind of, expand the roster a bit more this season?
It's always, if we're going to play the way that we play, which is to get up and down and pressure people and look to run whenever possible, it's got to be more than just five. And you can have the best conditioned five starters in the world, and foul trouble happens, and injuries happen, and fatigue happens, and so we've always had that kind of mentality is whenever you're called on is to be ready. And we had a great group of girls this year, girls with experience. You look at Kendall Schrammick and Katie Jasickas and Elise Stout and Kathleen Doyle. Those are all girls who have at least 3 years. For Kathleen, 4 years on the varsity. These are girls who have been through a lot. Mm-hmm. Even getting into the playoffs, though, we're looking at some girls who didn't play a ton in the playoffs last year, and we saw that a couple of times in the regional, maybe even early in the sectionals. Like, this is the first real big game that they've been in terms of, there's a huge crowd here, and it's the playoffs, and it's a do or die moment. And I think they learned a lot in a short amount of time in terms of, what it takes to win on that kind of state tournament stage. But that was always our hope, is that we're throwing even a couple of freshmen into the fire early on with Claire Prassy and Lauren Stack, mm-hmm. and then some experience early on. Claire Prassy had a great third quarter against Homestead earlier this year. and that pays dividends. It's what happens if someone picks up 2 fouls? Well, we've got to go to the bench, early in the first half, and I think we always had girls who were ready and willing to step up, and having them been through some of these tough tests earlier in the year is only going to help in the long run.
And looking at it from the coaching side of things, I've gotten to talk to a lot of the players, and very kind of mixed answers here. When you talk about winning state last year, coming into this season, heading into the playoffs, did you think the pressure of wanting to get that repeat, but then again knowing what it takes to win state, did that make the run a little bit easier or perhaps a little more difficult? It's been a very, very mixed from everybody we've talked to about that one.
I think
a little bit of both. Almost.
Yeah, in some ways it's harder because the pressure's on. We were hosting the sectional this year, so for me, I didn't want to lose in the sectional. You don't want to lose at home, in front of your fans. And I was happy very, very happy when we got to the super sectional. I knew we were going to be playing an Edwardsville team that was deep in terms of experience. They weren't deep in terms of numbers. They didn't go very far on their bench, and so I thought we had a pretty good chance. But I don't know, the pressure. There was definitely some pressure from within. Some obviously wanting to go back to state. We had a great experience, and there was, on the other side on the other hand, we'd been there before, so we kind of knew the drill. We knew that these pressure situations were going to get ramped up, and we had to really clean a few things up in practices heading into each and every game. And I think the preparation from Coach Kilbride's perspective, he was getting more tapes and watching more film, I think, than at any point during our state tournament run last year.
Now, at what point do you kind of get to Does enjoying the championship kind of end and kind of start gearing up for next year? I mean, how much time do you really have to kind of enjoy?
I'll take a few weeks off. I got some work to catch up on, but we really started up again full force in June. We'll take all of June to play summer league and shootouts and start getting focused on the returners for next year. This is a nice time to celebrate the championship, and we had the pep rally today, and it's nice to bask in that for a little while.
And I'm sure you have, like you mentioned, kind of taking a few weeks to enjoy it. Probably haven't thought about it too much, but you got to be fairly confident looking at the role that you met Lauren Stack, Claire Prassey, some of the freshmen made coming in, and then knowing that going forward, next season, Kendall Schrammick, Katie Jasickas, two very important players from this season, are kind of going to be taking on that bigger role. So it has to be pretty confident looking ahead to next year as well.
Yeah, we're going to be good. It's really hard to replace 1,000-point scorers. They don't come along, and a player like Emily Ashew, a player like Emily Schrammick, a player like Kathleen Doyle, a player like Elise Stout, a player like Sammy Valentine, who stepped up huge in the state semifinals and the state finals. And then the other seniors that we've had the last few years, Emma Lavin, Morgan Tamala, Sydney Stevens, Maddie Bozick, these are great character kids, and they're competitors, and they've made this whole experience fun, and they've made it exciting, and it's hard to replace that. Now, like you said, we're going to be good. We have some kids returning. Kendall Schrammick, you mentioned, Katie Jasickas, and Emma Line, even Simba Malanga, who was a transfer who sat out this year in practice, has been great. And so looking forward, the cupboard's not empty, but it remains to be seen, if we can make another trip back down to normal. I'm sure now, if people haven't heard of us before, they're going to be gunning for us in the future. So.
Yeah, you're definitely that top target now, I think, with the back-to-back.
Absolutely.
Looking back to your time at Benet, though, in the early 2000s, and kind of comparing that to the dominant athletic programs that have really started to develop, and you mentioned you've been here about 8 years now coaching basketball on the boys and girls side of things. And seeing now, compared to your time at Benet, though, seeing the success that Coach Heitkamp has had with the boys, seeing Bennett's girls volleyball team has come in and just been one of the best programs in the state, and now being a part of the girls basketball team, kind of heading into that same direction. What's the feeling for you, being an alumni of this school and now getting to see some of these athletic programs just really starting to thrive, being a member of the coaching staff now?
Yeah, I'm extremely, extremely fortunate to be part of it. I mean, when I was a junior is when Benet won their first ever team state championship, in soccer, and they repeated the following year when I was a senior. And the energy and the school spirit that goes along with that kind of performance is infectious. And knew when I ultimately came back to teach at Benet that I wanted to be part of something like that. And I had the great fortune to be part of the boys program for 6 years, and they had a great run with Dave Sobolewski and Frank Kaminsky and that crew, and went downstate a couple years ago with Sean O'Mara and Dan Sobolewski and Colin Pelletieri and Colin Bonnet, and really just the amount of school spirit and support from students, from alumni, from parents, from my teacher colleagues, and it really is just a great experience. It's a family atmosphere where everyone's getting behind each other. I have colleagues who come up and ask me about matchups and who's going to be good for next year, and are you guys going to three-peat and everything like that, and you can just tell the level of excitement just gears up with each and every season. There are such high expectations now for all of our sports, in a good way. It's we want the best for all of our students, and we want them to compete at a high level and work towards their potential.
Well, congratulations on another phenomenal season. Back-to-back state champions, and let's see if you can make it 3 in a row next year.
All right, thanks a lot.